listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast with Murphy Hamilton and Joe Pollock. Proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. Subscribe, listen, take home the title.
What's up, Takeaway Nation? Welcome into our Week 11 recap. This episode brought to you by Sudafed and Dayquil. They're not sponsors, but they're the only way I'm alive right now. How are you guys doing tonight?
Hanging in there, man. Just, recovering from the weekend.
Yeah, you got to recover. I got you. Okay. All right, guys, to start this show, I have a pretty simple question. What was the most disappointing thing for you this Sunday? What was like the worst thing for your teams, for your fantasy perspective this Sunday?
Well, I built this cash lineup on DK that I absolutely loved. And it was going into the afternoon slate right in the money. I was up like $200 with a chance for it to be a lot more. Had Mohamed Sanu left to play, feeling great. Mohamed Sanu rolls his ankle on like his fifth snap and he barely puts up any fantasy points. It was so disappointing, especially because I took Deebo Samuel out of that lineup when Emmanuel Sanders was announced as active.
Ugh.
Yep. It was rough. Bad beat there.
I'm in an all IDP league that I'm the number one scorer in the league, and it's not particularly close. And I'm about to lose my 7th matchup in the last 8 weeks.
That's some bad luck.
It's just the kind of thing that makes you reconsider playing fantasy football.
No, I'm right there with you. I got a good one too. So in my league of record, I have Kittle, I have Hilton, I have a bench full of players that I don't want to drop, but I can't play. And I needed a tight end this week, and I wasn't really excited about Irv Smith. So I picked up Eric Ebron. Then Irv Smith scores a touchdown. I need a running back because I was actually worried that David Montgomery wasn't going to play. And I honestly should have swapped him out anyway. But I decided that I will, drop John Brown because he's been on my bench the last few weeks. And I didn't want to drop George Kittle because he's hurt. I know my processes were crazy and it was over tinkering for sure, but I just bombed. Like it's one of those moments where I'm like, well, you know what? I deserve to go to the Sack Bowl in this league.
I can't disagree with you on that one.
Yeah.
What is John Brown right now in season long at wide receiver?
Please don't tell me because I'll feel worse. Are you trying to drive?
I have to look it up now. I absolutely have to look it up.
I bet you he's a low end wide receiver 2 is what I'm betting. But but not like low, like 24, it's for like 20. I'm
14. He is the wide receiver,
it's a high end
14. That's
Jesus.
in DraftKings scoring. I bet you it's even higher in PPR. Let me look.
I will not be on the next show, guys. I will have performed Harry Carey when this show is over in shame.
He's a wide receiver 1 in standard PPR scoring. Wide receiver 12.
Jesus. John Smokey Brown.
I think the kicker was that I actually decided to keep DK over John Brown.
Oh, I mean, that could go well down the stretch. He's got massive upside.
I do love some
crazy,
DK, but man, John Brown, he's been super solid all year.
I know. And then he goes off for like this crazy 30-point game, and I'm just watching, crying, sad.
It's all right, buddy. You'll be okay.
Speaking of guys at the back end of wide receiver 1, do you remember how much we talked up Marvin Jones during the preseason?
I feel like we talked about him a little bit.
We talked about, in the wide receiver show especially, we were talking about how he might be one of the best values in this draft and that he could finish right around Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay is wide receiver 14. Marvin Jones is wide receiver 11.
Boom. Wrecked. I wonder which one of us was higher in the preseason.
I don't remember. I think all of us were above the fantasy community consensus, though. So
I think we were all above the ADP. I think I was like a half round or maybe a full round ahead of the ADP on him. Because I remember we talked about it in the wide receiver show, and I thought when we put all the numbers together, I was going to be the idiot who had him up ranked too high. And then you guys were right there with me, and I was like, oh, yeah, cool.
Nah, you were just the idiot that put Juju at 1.
Oh, don't do that to him. That's rubbing salt in wounds that don't need rubbing salt.
Hey, man,
that's mean.
His team's got like, 1 loss? I think he can deal with some salt.
Oh, man.
He could be a Broncos fan over here giving games away.
Hey, man, we've had a lot of salt in recent years. Do you not remember that we had Jim Tom Sula as our head coach?
I blocked that out.
Yeah.
I tried to.
I'm surprised that you didn't.
It's been months of therapy and it's still not working.
All right, guys, let's dive into the show, and we'll always start out with some news and notes.
News and notes from across the NFL.
All right, first up, I just want to touch on the fight at the end of the Steelers game. Myles Garrett, Mason Rudolph, Marquise Pouncey, and Larry Ogunjobi. I can't pronounce that for the life of me. But
you got it, man.
You nailed that.
Yeah,
you nailed it. Yeah, you stuck the landing. That was good.
Woo. Finally, I'll get one or two right here and there. But guys, I honestly didn't watch the fight. As many Americans, I turned off the game about 2 minutes before it was over because it was already over. Did you guys see the fight live, or did you watch it in like a replay and a video, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I run football squares, so I have to watch even the terrible games down to the last second. It was ridiculous. And I can't figure out if Mason Rudolph deserved it because he was pulling on Myles Garrett's helmet, or if he didn't deserve it because his glove was stuck in Myles Garrett's face mask. I still don't know. I've watched it like 40 times, and they aren't telling us anything. So I think we'll never know on that one.
The thing that got me, and I tried to watch it frame by frame as best I could, and just try to glean a little bit of perspective as to why that went as sideways as it did. And it wasn't so much what we saw in the video. And Myles Garrett should not have swung a helmet. Let's be clear. I mean, that's pretty egregious, and he deserves the suspension he got. But I feel like Mason Rudolph should have gotten something because he did try to take the man's helmet off. And I feel like that gets lost a little bit. I think they're both in the wrong. I think Ogunjobi, when he pushed Mason down, in the wrong. I think Pouncey comes up, starts kicking Myles Garrett. Like, all these guys should have had some level of suspension, even if only a game. But the post-game comments by Rudolph really turned me off. Oh, that's Bush League. Dude, you tried to pull the man's helmet off, and then he snapped. Like, are you serious right now?
In between the Rudolph trying to pull his helmet off and Garrett hitting him with Rudolph's helmet, there was also a groin kick by Rudolph. I think that's what really escalated.
Right. And he had done enough, and I'm seeing all kinds of stuff on Twitter, or had seen all kinds of stuff on Twitter here about, if you think Mason Rudolph, was in the wrong on this, you need to reevaluate your life, and all these other crazy comments. And I'm like, look, man, fights don't just happen out of the blue. Myles Garrett didn't just, decide he was going to come across the line of scrimmage swinging his helmet. Like, he was still provoked on some level. His response was garbage, and he shouldn't have done it. But the video shows that he was provoked. And the post-game reaction from everybody in the Browns camp, including Garrett, was that it shouldn't have happened and it should be condemned and it was a bad thing. But then you get the Bush League response out of Rudolph. I thought his response was in and of itself Bush League.
I don't want to get too far into this, but when you say that Mason Rudolph deserved a punishment out of this, you're not taking things away from what Myles Garrett did. Both of these things were bad, and neither excuses the other.
Right.
It's poor behavior on everyone's part. So people that are running around saying, well, Myles Garrett didn't deserve blah, blah, blah. Like, they both deserve suspensions or fines. They deserve what they're getting and maybe more for Mason Rudolph. And that doesn't mean that either of them is in the right.
Right. Agreed. And that's exactly what I'm saying. But I think Pouncey and Ogunjobi, their roles were really brushed under the rug because of the helmet swing. Pouncey tried to stomp. He was kicking and stomping Myles Garrett. Remember the Kareem Hunt video when he apparently tried to kick at and otherwise stomp at some lady in a hotel? It took him a year and he's playing football again. He was trying to do that on a football field. Are we not suspending this guy? We got to figure out where the lines are.
On a lighter note, just to end the story, I think the best comment I've seen on Twitter, Facebook, I've seen it several times now, was that Mason Rudolph didn't get suspended because they're punishing the Steelers organization, making them continue to start Mason Rudolph. So I thought that was beautiful and, a good humor side of this.
It's probably true.
Yeah, probably very true. All right, let's touch on some quarterbacks that are in the news for different reasons. First up, Kyle Allen will remain the starter in Carolina as the team does not feel it needs to look at other quarterbacks right now. And Mitch Trubisky was benched in the second half of Sunday's game due to a controversial hip injury. I'm using finger quotes on that one. Guys, let's start off with the more fun one. Mitch Trubisky, do you guys believe he has a hip injury?
No, I'm looking at this, and you can call it a hip injury if you mean he didn't have the fortitude to lead that team in the last 3 minutes of the game, and that's why they brought Chase Daniel in. The conversation that took place on the sideline, and you could see it for an extended period of time where, you got Nagy whispering in Trubisky's ear or talking to him right in his ear for a couple of solid minutes. That's not the indication that there's a hip injury. That's the, hey, I'm trying to talk you off the ledge. I need you to lead this football team, but I'm pulling you out of this thing because you've looked like crap. And he was having a real conversation with him. They're using the hip injury as just a cover to say, hey, yeah, he was playing poorly because of the hip, or, yeah, he sustained it late. It's garbage. It's a cover up. And, he'll be playing next week potentially. But either way, it's junk.
If he doesn't play next week, there are some pretty big fantasy implications here. We're going to get some massive salary relief and maybe an emergency streaming situation out of Tariq Cohen because his target percentage goes up to 20% plus with Chase Daniel in the game over the last 2 years. So that's something you certainly need to keep an eye on as the week goes on.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and everything changes in that offense, right? And a lot of the...
Except Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson stays the same.
Yeah, he basically remains. Cohen comes up. Montgomery probably goes down even if he's healthy. I'd be interested to see how that plays out. But really interesting layout there. I mean, unless he's, I don't know what the Bears are thinking right now, but they're 4-6 and the Raiders have their first round draft pick.
Guys, before we move on, I just want to also let you know that the phrase hip injury hurts me in my soul right now. I know you guys know why. It does.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds for the most part like they got that thing reduced for Tua before there was massive concern for because Bo Jackson's injury that they're comparing this thing to wasn't the injury so much that killed him. It was that basically the top of his femur died because it wasn't getting blood flow. And then it never really healed in the same way.
Avascular necrosis is what it's called.
Yep. So Tua's not out of the woods yet on that front, but it sounds like he's trending in the right direction.
Yeah. Tua's not playing this year, but I wonder if he goes into the draft now.
I think he still does. Personally.
I think it kind of depends on how he's healed up. He's got some time to decide.
Yeah, I just wonder if you can't participate, say in the combine, for example, and you can't do any of the pregame workouts, if he goes in, does he slide? I mean, that'll be a really interesting conversation in February, but definitely worth thinking about when we look at all the teams that are piling up at the top of the draft and who needs quarterbacks.
I hope he slides. And I honestly hope he slides because of the injury, into the late first, early second, because I really want him to go to a team that has an offensive line, at least a decent one. You know what I mean? Because he can't stand that many hits. He's not very durable. I mean, at least in his college career, he hasn't been. He's had multiple different surgeries here and there. I love the kid and I want to see him stay upright. So I kind of look at this maybe as a blessing in disguise.
He might slide anyway because of this, because this is his third significant injury in 2 years.
Exactly.
That's what I was just thinking.
All right. And then quickly, Kyle Allen. Do you guys have anything to say on this? He had such a hot start and now he's kind of had 2 back-to-back really bad games.
I feel like I talked about this quite a bit when he was first coming on the scene. He's not a great quarterback. He's an adequate game manager at best. So if you can put him in situations where he has to throw the ball downfield to succeed, he's going to make mistakes. He just doesn't have the skill set to be a solid top tier NFL quarterback.
Carolina is going to be one of those teams looking for a quarterback in the offseason, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them go out. I think Cam's done. I just don't know that and I don't mean done as a player. I mean, he's probably done in Carolina. He's got the last year of his deal. They're going to owe him $19 million. They can get rid of him and not be on the hook for any of it. It seems to me that they would go younger or cheaper while they rebuild other parts of that team because they're not that far away.
I mean, obviously, Christian McCaffrey, come on. He'll carry you halfway there.
Well, yeah, and you need to get something done on his rookie contract because you're going to end up having to pay him just gobs of money. When you think about the contract Zeke got, and Zeke is a strong 3-down running back. McCaffrey is one of the few players who can legitimately play all 4 downs if you need him to. And that's what's so terrifying about him.
He good.
Yeah, he's real good. He's nightmare sauce for defensive coordinators, man. He's real terrifying.
All right, and finally, the last bit of news. Let's really just talk about the David Johnson thing. On Sunday, he only played a handful of snaps, 0 carries in favor of the new acquisition, Kenyon Drake. And then later he tweeted simply, "Welp, is it time to hit the panic button on David Johnson, guys?"
Yes, absolutely. I think that there's a world where David Johnson goes on IR in the next 2 weeks. If you watch that film from last week when he actually did get carries, it was ugly. It really looks like he doesn't have the physical tools to play the running back position anymore.
He looks like a fullback or a tight end.
Yeah, he's
gotten big slow, or something.
He's not agile. I think it's a back injury. He looks like I do when I throw out my back. He's just trying to play football when he's doing it.
Did you try to play football when you threw out your back?
No, I didn't even get out of bed. I think it's kind of admirable that he's going out there, but he doesn't look good.
I mean, I was just checking. I was just wondering if there's some film out there of Joe, hobbling around with a bad back trying to play football.
No.
But yeah, look, here's the thing. David Johnson, like we talked about Big Ben a few weeks ago and how before he got hurt, he kind of looked a little hefty. He had packed on a couple extra pounds. He looked big and slow. Then he got hurt. David Johnson kind of looks big and slow right now. He doesn't look like he doesn't have any burst. He doesn't seem like he's moving, with any kind of lateral agility. Like he used to be able to kind of give you some quick feet and give you a little move, cut here, cut there. And he wasn't going to go out there and, break everybody's ankles, but he could do enough at speed to make guys miss. He can't do any of that now. He looks like a tight end trying to run the football and not an athletic tight end. Like he looks like Ben Watson out there trying to run with the football.
Yeah. I mean, he used to have the speed to make you take a bad angle and the hips to make you miss when you dive at him. And he doesn't have either of those things anymore.
All of that explosion is gone. And I wonder if that has something to do with the back injury. I think you're probably onto something there.
All right, that'll do it for news and notes. Let's dive into our cheap date review. Let's start with quarterbacks. Jeff, you had Baker Mayfield this week, 21.82. Joe, you had Kyle Allen. I'm so sorry, 12.7. And I did somewhere in the middle, Jacoby Brissett with 16.12. Who'd have thought Baker would be the leader this week for all of us?
I mean, I thought I was hating myself by stacking up Browns. And Baker was due. He's still a good football player. And we were in a position where against a good defense, I thought it was kind of a close my eyes and pray sort of moment. But there's some decent matchups coming up for the Browns. We might be seeing more of this from Baker over the next couple weeks.
I hope so, man. Like I've never been a huge Baker Mayfield fan, but there are so many weapons on that offense that I want to see succeed. Like Odell Beckham Jr. is almost dead, and he's such a good football player.
Yeah, I really want to see more out of Odell. I'm hoping they can figure out how to get him the rock, but they've got Miami coming up, Pittsburgh again, Cincinnati, Arizona, Baltimore, Cincinnati.
Wow.
There's some prime matchups in there for Baker to put up some numbers, for Odell to put up some numbers. Landry's going to have a couple good days. That Miami game might be a bonanza for your two running backs. It might be a situation where you can go ahead and just plug in Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb and watch them both go ahead and hang up 18 or 20.
All right, so running back in the cheap dates, Jeff, you had Brian Hill. Joe, you had J.D. McKissick, and I had Duke Johnson. We all kind of fumbled cheap date running back this week.
Yeah, Kareem Hunt counted too, didn't he? So you got to give him a little bit that.
Okay.
He was
cheaper. He was cheaper than Brian Hill even by $500.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I played Kareem Hunt in multiple DK lineups. I think it was a pretty good call. Like 2.74 isn't great, but it's going to get you to the cash if the rest of your players hit that 4X mark for you.
Right. Yeah, Brian Hill really I think he screwed everybody. Everybody seemed to be in on him. And what's funny is I actually didn't play him in any of my lineups when I went and filled out my, when I threw money down on it, I got away from Brian Hill only because he was the chalk. And I did stack my lineups where I went all elite running backs or tried to. And then I totally cheaped out at wide receiver. But so hopefully that didn't stick me too bad. And I'm hoping it didn't stick you guys too bad.
Yeah, I mean, I played in a ton of cash games this week, and Brian Hill was 53.79% owned in the Thursday, Monday double up. So, like, he was even higher owned in some of my cash games that I played in. So, playing him didn't totally crap your team because half of the field did the same thing.
Yeah, but if you could have gotten the elite backs and gone contrarian and hit it on a couple really cheap wideouts, might have been enough to get you to win.
Sure. Again, my problem was Sanu, not Hill.
Yeah, it's true.
All right, as far as our cheap date wide receivers, Jeff, you had Hunter Renfrow, 11.6. Joe, you had Russell Gage, 5.2. And I had Deebo Samuel, 24.4. I'm going to call the win on that one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Deebo.
I had a touchdown called back again.
Yeah, I noticed Russell Gage's name. Like, I didn't watch that game per se. I was at work, but like the game cast, I noticed his name pop up every once in a while. And I was like, oh, Joe's having a solid day. And then I look at this fantasy stats later. I'm like, well,
yeah, I got 1.58x out of him. And with that touchdown, it would have been well over 4x. So,
I say Renfrow got tackled 2 yards or 3 yards short of the goal line on one play. I got all excited when he made a catch and I thought he was going to score and then he didn't.
Just some spoilers. Both Jeff and my wide receiver are in our Tapping the Wire segment. We were on them a little bit earlier. But hey, I mean, they're still under own, so you can go out there and get them.
Cha-ching.
Cha-ching indeed. All right, at tight end, Jeff, you played Ross Dwelly, 17.4. Joe, you played Noah Fant 9.3, and I played Kyle Rudolph 17.7. Honestly, as far as tight ends go, I feel like we all did pretty well.
Yeah, none of these guys crapped your team. Like 2.51x out of Noah Fant for me isn't fantastic, but it was a decent play. I really played Noah Fant thinking that the Broncos were going to be playing from behind in this game, and that certainly was not the case. What a strange game that was.
Yeah, that game didn't make any sense. I was tracking that one on my phone, and I was watching the score, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So it was a very interesting one. I can't wait to go back and watch that one on Game Pass.
It might not be worth your time. I don't think it was very representative of what either team brings to the table.
It looked really interesting when you're tracking just the scores.
It wasn't as interesting live, I'll tell you that.
Oh, man. All right, maybe I'll skip it.
I think the thing that infuriated me the most is that post-game, there's a comment from Vic Fangio that's like, we'll get there eventually. And I'm like, with our defense and the tools you have, how are you not already at least semi there now? Like, for the love of God. You're giving games away.
You need a quarterback really badly if you're the Broncos, though. So, like, it's frustrating to watch them lose 4 fourth quarter leads in one season. But also, like, a higher draft pick is better for this franchise long term. So,
you're right.
You know, where's Drew Lock, though? Seriously. Drew Lock has been healthy enough to play for almost a month, and they're still not letting him practice.
It's worrying.
What kind of organization does that? You need to lose games if you need a higher draft pick. And if he comes in and he wins you games, you might have your quarterback of the future and you can draft a left tackle that isn't a sieve. What are you doing?
Maybe he's not getting it done in the classroom.
Sure. But like, I think the best way to teach him that is to have him go out there and get smashed.
Wow. That may not be good for their long-term investment. And it's probably not good for ticket sales if they trot him out there and play the Dolphins plan.
I was actually listening to some of the sports radio in Denver, and they were doing one of their little call-in comment segments. And this is the general overarching opinion of the community is get the kid out there. We don't care if he loses. It gets us a high draft pick. You need to see what you have before the draft next year.
Yeah, and they do. There's something else has got to be going on there. Either he doesn't understand enough of the playbook yet to even call the plays, or maybe he's, quote, healthy enough to play, but there's still like some lingering issues. Maybe it's a thing in the classroom. Maybe he's just not putting the work in. I mean, who knows? There could be any number of things. And on some level, no matter how inept a front office is, I have to trust the coaching staff a little bit to say, you know what, this kid's not ready, because those guys have to go out and coach and they have to try and field a winner every week. It doesn't matter what the fans say about draft capital. The coaches are still coaching and fighting for their livelihood. You know, just because the team gets a great draft pick doesn't mean that coach will be there to see it. That's probably why Drew Lock is still sitting.
All right, and as far as defenses, Jeff, you had the Falcons, 26. Joe had the Cardinals with 5 points, and I had the Redskins with 5 points. Well, resounding victory for Jeff in the defensive category. Who would have expected the Falcons to be so good 2 weeks in a row?
The Falcons are a good defense now. Those coaching changes have absolutely changed everything. If you go in and you watch the film, they're kind of talented on the back end, even early on. They just give up giant plays because they miss assignments left and right. Now they have a guy who's actually a defensive backs coach coaching the defensive backs, and it seems to be working. Go figure.
Instead of the wide receivers. Like, that was killing me. I took for granted that Raheem Morris wasn't the defensive backs coach. I was like, what is going on there? When they finally announced, oh yeah, he's going back to coach DBs again, I was like, wait, he wasn't coaching DBs? I had to go look to see what he was doing. I think the Falcons, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later in the show, they might be one of the best, 3-win teams now in the league. I mean, seriously, though, this could be a team that gets hot down the stretch. They're not going to be able to make it without a boatload of help. They're not going to be in a conversation for a playoff spot, but they can make someone's life miserable down the stretch.
It's always fun to play spoiler.
They have a ton of division games left.
Yeah, and I don't know if I want to play Atlanta right now because they appear to be firing on all cylinders. And that's a little scary when you're a playoff team and you're trying to kind of wrap things up or you're getting close and you get a team that's just coming in guns a-blazing like that. I think they're gonna spoil somebody's party, and it would not surprise me in the slightest to see them really make some noise down the stretch. Again, I'm not figuring on a playoff spot; they're probably too far behind at this point. But man, they could probably get some work in. I mean, they've got Tampa Bay; that's probably a win.
I'm drinking the Kool-Aid in that matchup too on this defense. I will play them in DFS against Jameis Winston.
Oh, absolutely. You get New Orleans again, and they shut down New Orleans last time, so that wouldn't surprise me if they pulled it again there. Carolina, we already talked about their quarterback issues unless Kyle Allen gets himself right.
All three of those games you just mentioned are at home, too.
Yeah. You get the 49ers. That's in San Francisco. That's questionable, but this defense could shut down Jimmy G. I don't see that as being that far of a reach. Jacksonville and Tampa Bay again. That game against the Niners, that's the spoiler.
There's legitimately a world where they make the playoffs. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's possible.
They'd have to get in at 9-7.
Yep, they have to win all of the rest of their games.
Yeah, if they win out, they could make some noise. I think the game for them that is going to be effectively their playoff or their Super Bowl game is against the 49ers. Because if they beat the Niners here, Seattle wins the NFC West, and suddenly the 49ers aren't the number 1 seed. Now they're going to go ahead and be playing in the wild card round. And so that could really change the landscape of the NFC.
All right, so final scores for the week. Jeff, 156.42. Joe, 120.5, and me at 128.02 because losing Tyreek Hill. Jeff, let's start with you. Final thoughts on your overall roster, not just your cheap dates.
DFS requires obviously a lot of luck. And I'm really thrilled that I got 28 out of Michael Thomas. That was my pay up spot. Last week, I got completely boned by all my pay up guys. But this week, I got 20 out of Zeke, 28 out of Mike Thomas. Felt really, really good about that. And a lot of these guys, I might be trying to recycle again for next week. We talked about, the Browns have the Dolphins. Baker and Hunt and Landry could all be on deck again.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I think that if Kittle is out, also Ross Dwelly, he's getting a target share that's viable for DFS. He's going to be more expensive, but not substantially.
Yeah, I like Dwelly a lot. I mean, he looks good. Like, he moves really well for a guy that was undrafted. Did he even go to a college? Like, I have no idea where he went to school. And I mean, this guy just he spontaneously combusted onto the football field. Like, we don't know where he came from.
All right, Joe, on to you. Any final thoughts on your roster this week?
Yeah, man, it was rough. Like, Josh Jacobs had 6 goal line carries in that game, and he didn't get into the end zone. You've got a touchdown taken back from Russell Gage. This is just one of those weeks where you kind of have to chalk it up. Like, Kyle Allen played a terrible game, but outside of him, there were some really hard luck calls in this lineup, and you just kind of got to roll with it.
All right, we'll end it with me. My only real thought is that the thing that you started a week or two ago, Joe, where you basically said you can always pay up for C-Mac and it'd be worth it. I agree with you 100% now. I think Christian McCaffrey is going to be locked in my lineup as long as I can find other good values every week going forward in cheap dates because he's just ridiculous every week.
You just have to do it. He's getting 30 plus every week. You realize the Carolina Panthers scored 3 points this week?
Yeah, and Christian McCaffrey still had 33.1.
Christian McCaffrey had 33.1 points and the team scored 3. Imagine if he scores 2 touchdowns. It's like almost a 50-point week.
He's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, it's like we talked about. He's potentially the only running back who's also just a 4-down player because he can also return punts and kicks, and the guy's incredible. He might be the best football player in the league right now.
And he's getting the volume. The volume is key. The talent is there. Like, he's just a guy that you can't fade.
Sure. I mean, I love Saquon Barkley and his athleticism and his size and all that kind of his size-adjusted athleticism and all that mess and all his metrics. But I think McCaffrey is just a better pure football player. And that's saying a lot because I've got a pretty serious Saquon man crush.
Also, for real, can Jamison Crowder stay relatively cheap? Like, he wasn't a cheap date at $5,700 this week, but if he stays in that level, I'm going to love playing in my flex a lot. I mean, 18.6, that's fantastic. I'll take it all the time.
He's getting more expensive, but he's not going up that fast because he's not scoring 30 points, but
good.
He's solid.
Yes.
I wouldn't be shocked if he went up to like $6,000 next week, and it puts him right on that fringe where it's like, if he gets 18, I'm getting about maybe 3x out of him. Like you're starting to get to the 3x teetering point.
Jamison Crowder is 6,200 this week against Oakland. I think that's a solid play.
Yeah.
Ooh. All right. Okay.
You might need to pay down more than that or have him be your wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, which sounds kind of scary if you want to fit Christian McCaffrey in, but who knows? Injuries could bring us some salary relief in other places. So let's see.
Nothing scares me with C-Mac leading my team.
And it shouldn't.
All right, that'll do it for our cheap date reviews. Let's move on to some booth review.
Booth review.
All right, Joe, let's kick it off with you. Let's do your first booth review.
I was watching that Cowboys at Lions game, and the game script was really favorable for J.D. McKissick. The only major problem here was that Bo Scarborough got signed and got a ton of snaps.
Yeah.
We'll talk about him a little bit later, but I think that this Lions backfield might be turning into something you just want to avoid, considering the Belichick pedigree we've got going on here.
So Bo Scarborough is going to eventually be the LeGarrette Blount of this offense.
Sure, and they don't score enough points to make that viable.
Yeah, I'd say it would fit the bill, for like next season if you're talking about having Carry-On, maybe McKissick, and then Scarborough as a hammer at the end. Like that would be a really interesting group to have in 2020. You wouldn't own them. You wouldn't. I mean, for Detroit, not for fantasy. You wouldn't want to touch anybody there.
All right, Jeff, on to you. What was your first what to watch for that we're going to review today?
I was looking at the Jags and Colts, or trying to, and I really expected to see this offense kind of level out a little bit. I wanted to see some more Fournette setting the table for Nick Foles and company, and I was really confused. I mean, 47 pass attempts. Dede saw 6. So it turns out Nick Foles is, in fact, swimming with the Charks. 15 targets for DJ.
God, that was a bad one.
Oh, come on. That's wordcraft. So we know DJ Chark is still going to be the guy. It looks like that's going to be where all the targets are going to be funneled. And Foles does seem to have greater control when he's playing than our boy Gardner. But I think Dede might be able to be droppable in some redraft leagues. I just don't see him getting the volume or the work if this is the thing that's going to continue. The other thing that stood out was 8 carries for Leonard Fournette. They were only trailing 3 at the half. Like, he should have had 8 to 10 carries in the first half, not for the whole game. So they need to figure out how to balance him in more to keep this defense fresh. This Jags defense isn't the one we saw 2 or 3 years ago where they were just locking everybody down. They do need to figure out how to keep Fournette going and eat up more clock.
DJ Chark is legit, too. It's not like this is a fluke and he's just the only guy. We're not looking at a Josh Gordon situation here. This guy can run routes. He's fast enough to break one on almost any play. Like, he is a really solid football player.
I was taunted relentlessly by people in the fantasy community when I was drafting and hyping up DJ Chark when he came out. And I was taking him in the 3rd round of rookie drafts, and I was laughing. 2nd round of rookie drafts, and I was laughing all the way to the bank. And then he did nothing. And I got crapped on continuously. I'm going to wait till the end of this year to start my victory lap, but you better believe I'm stretching the quads out, and I'm going to be running that one all off season.
For the record, if you were making Chark puns while you were drafting him, I'd boo you too.
I wasn't. That didn't even occur to me at the time.
Thank God. All right, let's move on to me. My first one was the Browns and the Steelers game, and that was, well, interesting. The Browns got a win, but it wasn't one I'd ever reference. I was specifically looking at running back usage in this game, though, and Chubb and Hunt seem to both be low-end RB2s now, which is not quite what everybody expected. We kind of felt like one of them would take the lead and the other one would just kind of depreciate value, but they both have some value right now, which is great if you have a trade deadline that lasts for a little bit longer, and it's terrifying if you have them stuck on your team. I'm somebody that owns both, and I'm terrified of the coin flip each week because you never know which one's going to score that 2 or 3 extra points you may need.
Nope, don't do a coin flip, Murphy. You're looking at this all wrong. Kareem Hunt is getting the target share that you need to have both of those guys in your lineup unless you have an elite option elsewhere.
Chubb should still be considered an RB1-ish, and it might be a little lower end RB1 than it had been, but he should still be considered a top 12 running back option. And then Hunt should be considered a low end RB2/flex play. And that would leave you safe. And you can certainly plug in both guys because they have enough work and an easy enough schedule coming forward where I would absolutely sit on both guys unless someone blows you away with an offer.
Okay. All right, Jeff, back to you.
I was looking at the Bears and Rams in the Sunday night game. There was the rematch of Black Sunday, and Gurley and the Rams got smashed last year in this game, and it started their kind of backward trend for this offense. And Todd Gurley, man, he just came out and finally looked like the guy that we had been expecting. He had a few good runs, 133 total yards, 3 more grabs, and a touchdown. We might be gearing up for some Todd Gurley time down the stretch here. Hopefully they're going to fully unleash him. And maybe that Rams O-line can kind of coalesce into something semi-solid. so that he can really carry some fantasy owners down the stretch. And Goff and Trubisky, they are who we thought they were. Bad. It's real bad. Real bad.
They mentioned this on the broadcast ad nauseum, but they weren't running the zone blocking scheme that is like the hallmark of that Shanahan Kubiak-esque system. They were running a ton of power and it was working. They need to keep mixing those plays. They can't run all power because they don't have the guys on the outside right now to be opening things up downfield, and people will bring linebackers and safeties down into the box and on the defensive line. But there is a solution here that makes Gurley a player that's worth something down the stretch.
I traded them away 2 weeks ago in the league.
I don't know if you're going to regret that. They still have a lot of work to do. That offensive line is playing terrible. But the people that are taking victory laps based on Gurley's knee injury, I'm going to say it now, they're flat out wrong. Like, he's still a solid NFL running back. The problems are in the scheme and in the other personnel on that offense more than they are with him.
Since Sean McVay has taken over the Rams, Todd Gurley has led the NFL in touches and total yards. Since Sean McVay took over the Rams. Now, that was obviously 17-18. Now we're looking at 2019. He's like 71st in total touches. And he's, I want to say, in the 60s or 70s also in total yards. They've really scaled back his workload, and it's probably in an effort to keep him fresh, which is a good thing for anybody who has Todd Gurley on their roster moving forward.
Also, though, in adjusted line yards, I haven't looked at the updated figures for this week, but on Football Outsiders adjusted line yards, the Rams led the league last year. They were blocking at a historically good level. This year, last time I looked, it was 1.3 yards less. That's 1.3 yards per carry, basically, that you can take off of Todd Gurley's production.
Right. And you can also chalk that up to 2017, 2018. The Rams ran the same 5 guys for all 16 games. They had no adjustments. They didn't really have any injuries to speak of. They had 0 man games lost on the offensive line in 2 seasons. This year, they've had almost every guy has missed time, and I forget the number, but they've had a handful of different configurations of O-line in there, and that's not good for cohesion for that offensive line unit, and that also plays into some of the productivity issues.
They're getting old on the offensive line in spots, too. The rookies are staying in there, though. They played much better this week than we've seen in almost any week out of that offensive line.
Yeah, and that's, again, we just talk about, they coalesce and they really start coming together. Maybe this group that played against Chicago ends up being the group down the stretch. They could be pretty dangerous. See, I'll actually pull up the Rams schedule here. I've got it in front of me. They've got the Ravens next, but then the Cardinals, Seahawks, Cowboys, Niners, Cardinals.
Winnable games for sure.
Winnable games, and these are teams that can be run on. I don't see a brick wall in this group. The Ravens aren't really a brick wall. Cardinals certainly aren't a brick wall. Seahawks are tough, but I think they can be run on. The Cowboys are probably the toughest group to run on in this whole remaining schedule. Then you get the 49ers, who can be run on, and the Cardinals. I like Todd Gurley's upside here down the stretch.
I hope you're right.
I mean, I would say go trade for him. I mean, I feel like a dummy because I traded him away.
All right, back to me. Guys, I was really wrong about the Texans and Ravens game. I thought it was going to be a shootout, but to be fair, I think everybody in the industry thought that was going to be a shootout. The Ravens just destroyed Houston on Sunday, thrusting Lamar Jackson into the lead for the MVP race as of now. And I can't say I'm shocked, though. Lamar is just a human cheat code. We have to expect it.
When I asked last week if the Ravens were the best team in football, it was kind of a flaccid answer. I think it's a resounding yes now. Because this is a good football team. Houston is a really good football team. The Patriots are a really good football team. These games weren't competitive.
Right. The Ravens look really good as a total unit right now. And, that secondary is no joke. You've got great
Judon
leadership.
is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, and Judon's being helped by the fact that you've got great guys in the secondary. I mean, he's getting in and getting pressure, but it helps that you've got 4 guys on the back half that can literally shut down, any section of the field they want. And I don't know that there's a receiver core out there or a team out there that I would say, oh, well, that receiver group will take advantage of Baltimore. I just don't see that. And Lamar Jackson can beat you too many different ways. Sure, keep him from running. Get 0 yards running. He can throw it for 350 and 4. No doubt in my mind.
Hasn't that just been like the hallmark of the Ravens, though, for like the last decade? Just a solid, good defense every single year. They just needed that offensive playmaker to really bring it all together.
Yeah, Flacco's been riding on the coattails of that for the better part of a decade.
Yep. He's the example of why quarterbacks shouldn't get the contracts they get. Top-end quarterbacks should get the contracts they get. And the rest of these yahoos, they need to actually prove that they're, better than the other yahoos in the league.
Yes, pay Lamar Jackson whatever it takes to keep him in town. As long as he stays healthy, he's gold.
And they've got 3 more years after this one at a reasonable rate, because you'll have, you get the first 4 years, and then he was a first-round pick, so you get the 5th-year option on him. And I think that was a really shrewd move coming up in the draft, taking him right at the tail end. You get the 5th-year option on him. Man, gives you some time to really build this thing. I wouldn't be shocked if they win a Super Bowl before he has to re-up his deal.
They might win the Super Bowl this year.
Well, and that's, I wasn't going to come right out and be that bold, because I'm kind of hoping and praying my 49ers can get it done. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was the Ravens this year or next year. Like, there's a real possibility. This team's not particularly old, save a couple of guys. But man, they suddenly have some money to spend, and they've got a great foundation to work with. They're going to be dangerous for a few years.
All right, Joe, we're going to end it with you. What was your last booth review?
Last booth review is Chiefs at Chargers. I'm watching it right now. My immediate takeaway that I just had from this game is that Keenan Allen is the best route runner at wide receiver in the NFL. And I don't think it's close. He's so good.
In 3 years, F1 is going to be in that conversation too. He runs some really good routes, really underrated aspect of his game.
You mean Scary Terry, right?
I don't know who that is.
I don't know who F1 is, man. We're going to have this argument forever.
You guys are the worst. The thing that I was actually watching for in this game, though, was like Phillip Rivers was supposed to be in a smash spot, and he's doing exactly what I thought he was going to do. He's struggling. The offensive line is not playing well. He's missing open receivers because of the pressure. 9 points at this point in the game. They're getting blown out, and I don't think it's going to get much better.
Rivers doesn't look that good at all. And when I say that, I mean he's dropping back. He's standing back there for 2.5 to 3 seconds easy, maybe more than that, and he's still taking a sack. Phillip Rivers is supposed to be one of those guys that's kind of a pseudo gunslinger where he can get the rock in there. He knows how to throw guys open. I'm starting to wonder if he's slowing down to the point where maybe his release isn't there. Maybe he's not processing the game as quickly as he had, because it's hard for me to believe that this Chiefs secondary without Kendall Fuller, is locking down all these Charger receivers. There was multiple plays where he dropped back and had plenty of time by NFL standards, still didn't deliver the rock.
There's always been something about this Chiefs defense he can't figure out, though.
The takeaway.
I'm going to start this one out because I'm probably going to make Jeff a little mad. My takeaway from the week after watching the Niners play the Cardinals is that the Niners in the postseason will lose in the divisional round and just bum out their entire fan base until next year. I think they are a good team. I feel like they will get the bye and then lose.
Murphy, let me tell you a little secret about me. I'm always mad.
That's your secret?
That's your secret. You're a father. I get it. I understand.
Here's the thing. Based on what we've already talked about in the show, it wouldn't shock me if the Niners were playing in the first round. And it also wouldn't shock me if they got popped in the first round. We are, and I say weeks, obviously being a 49ers fan, I look at this and I say, we're good. We're potentially a year ahead of schedule based on our last 2 years of production. But Jimmy needs to be good Jimmy and not bad Jimmy if we're going to do anything in the postseason. And right now, we're seeing the tale of two Jimmys in games like that one against Arizona, where he was bad, and then good, and suddenly we pull out a win. I don't know if I can trust that every week.
No, I think against really good football teams, it's going to be a struggle because he needs to play better early in games than he has so far. He's been a little masked by how good the defense has played, but I don't trust Jimmy Garoppolo to be able to win a shootout against a good football team because I think Arizona is just an okay football team.
Well, I'll tell you what, here's the stretch. So we've got Green Bay Sunday night, and I'm willing to count that as a loss because Aaron Rodgers in prime time is almost as scary as Christian McCaffrey in the open field. You've got the Ravens on December 1st. I'd be willing to chalk that as a loss because I don't know how we're going to stop Lamar Jackson.
You aren't going to stop Lamar Jackson. That's it.
The Saints, I'm willing to count that as a W. The Falcons, that could be that spoiler game that really screws things up for the 49ers. If that's a loss, the Rams and the Seahawks game suddenly become vital. And I don't know if I want the Rams when they're getting hot or going into Seattle when the division's on the line in week 17. Like, this whole stretch run it's got me just experiencing levels of heartburn I've never felt before.
All right, Joe, what is your takeaway from the week?
I kind of just wanted to talk about the injuries for guys in smash spots that happen after the game has started. Like, it's getting out of control this year. Just in the last few weeks, we've got Mohamed Sanu this last week, Tyler Lockett the week before that. We had Emmanuel Sanders kind of in that situation. Like, are you guys experiencing as many mid-game injuries that tank your week as I am? Because it's every single week for me.
I don't think I'm as cursed as you are, but I'm experiencing some.
I just had to knock on wood, so I'm going to say no. Because, I don't want to experience that either. Not with the playoffs coming up.
It's the worst, man.
Don't knock on Robert Woods. He wasn't there this week.
Ah! Old Bobby Trees.
All right. And finally, Jeff, what is your takeaway from the week?
We talked about the Falcons a little bit earlier, and I've managed to convince myself that they are the best 3-7 team ever. It's an abysmal record, but man, that the schedule is looking up for them down the stretch. They suddenly look like they know what they're doing on both sides of the ball. They could really run the table and make some things difficult for teams like the 49ers that are in a playoff position that could be a little tenuous by week 15.
That would definitely be fun to watch, especially with all the expectations we had for the Falcons in the preseason and just watching them bomb the start of the year. It'd be great to see them make a push and actually try and get into the playoffs.
I think at 9-7, even if they win out, that would be a really tough in. Like, who are the other teams that get bounced out, I guess, is the question we'd have to ask. When you look at the 49ers, the Seahawks, the Rams off the top would all need to lose a few games. The Saints would have to lose some games. The Buccaneers are already out of it. I'm just, the NFC East is kind of a hodgepodge. The North, I almost called it the Central. I forgot how old I am. It's been the North for like a decade and a half. I don't know. 9-7 seems like a stretch to get in, though.
All right, that'll do it for the takeaway. Guys, let's talk about the waiver wire. It's time to tap the wire.
Tapping the wire.
All right, starting with quarterbacks, just quickly here. Brandon Allen, relatively good. We're not seeing Drew Lock anytime soon, so check on your waiver wire if you need somebody to stream. And Sam Darnold, 12% ownership. He has a really good end-of-season schedule, especially for the fantasy playoffs. I strongly consider picking him up.
Yeah, I'm not thrilled about either of these guys. I think if you don't have a quarterback at this point, you might be in trouble. But it's just stream season if you don't have a quarterback. There are some matchups where I like Darnold. There's some matchup where I like Mayfield. But I don't want to pick up any of these guys and start them for the rest of the season.
Well, guys, there's a notable bye week this week, and that's the Chiefs. So the Mahomes owner needs a quarterback this week. So it's a pretty crucial spot because you've already missed a couple of games with injuries and things like that. So if you don't already have that second quarterback, that Sam Darnold ad might be pretty clutch move, when you talk about, hey, I need one more win to get in the playoffs.
I'll start Baker Mayfield over Sam Darnold this week.
Yeah. Already getting into my cheap dates for this week. I see how you are.
I'm just looking at it like you can't start Dwayne Haskins. You might be able to start Jeff Driscoll.
Oh, no, I'm definitely taking Baker over all those guys. And I'm just assuming that Baker's already been snatched up and you're probably in a position where maybe you don't have enough fab or you're not the number one priority or high enough priority to land the guy you want. You should always have a secondary or even tertiary guy lined up because I know in one of my leagues, the guy who happens to have Mahomes also has Kelsey, Watkins, and he had another part of the Chiefs too that he'd been rotating in as a bench play. So, 4 of his 14 guys on his team are out on a bye. So that's pretty rough sledding there. But yeah, I would definitely go Baker, maybe Darnold, then maybe Driscoll. Ooh, Carr. Carr's a real good one. Okay, I might go Carr, Baker, then Driscoll.
Carr plays the Jets. They are a notorious pass funnel. They're one of the most efficient run defenses in the league, and their secondary is garbage. So I think that Carr and Baker are pretty close to one another there, but you've got to be worried with Baker that they're just going to run the ball 25 times with Hunt and Chubb, and he doesn't get any touchdowns. So I think Carr is probably the best streamer this week.
Yeah, that's why that's why I just said, okay, go Carr, Baker, and then it might be Driscoll as that third guy.
Foles against the Titans is also quite interesting.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think I trust those other guys more. And it's, for me, I have a mental block for Foles in fantasy. I just need to see him do it a couple of weeks. And I don't know. I want to believe that he's going to come out and throw it 47 times again. But I just feel like DeFilippo is going to get reined in a little bit. And they're going to say, hey, we like to run the ball around here. Hand the ball to, Fournette.
All right. Speaking of running the ball, let's move on to running backs. Bo Scarborough headlines the list. Naheem Hines and Jonathan Williams for Indy. They both had pretty decent workload with Marlon Mack out, having that hand surgery. Brian Hill, maybe check post waivers. I don't know if people are going to want to risk that, especially with his tweet after the game.
And the Buccaneers coming up.
Yeah, that's a
I'm
pretty
not
good
into
defense.
that.
Jay Ajayi being signed by the Eagles, just somebody for like a deep stash if you want to. And then Darius Geis, I feel like he's probably owned pretty well, but if he's out there for you, he had a pretty good return. I like Darius Geis a lot.
We're looking at a really big committee situation in Indianapolis, but that is the best running back situation in terms of offensive line and scheme. Jonathan Williams looked really, really solid in the snaps that he took this week. Jordan Wilkins was ahead of him on the depth chart, and he wasn't active because of that ankle injury. So that's why we saw all that volume. But if Jordan Wilkins misses time, Jonathan Williams has a chance to take over the first and second down work in that backfield at least, and that's valuable.
He may have even leaped Wilkins on the depth chart if Wilkins plays this week because he played that well.
It was good. It wasn't just a volume thing. It wasn't just a blocking thing. He looked elusive. He's fast. I don't understand how he's been buried on so many depth charts with the way that he looked in that game.
Well, remember, he had that big breakout in Buffalo a few years ago, and then he had a bunch of off-the-field issues, and he had gotten bounced around, was cut and suspended, and he had all kinds of other just issues. And he just never had another opportunity to play. And I think a lot of it had to do with the other garbage in his life, and he wasn't just playing football. But it seems like he's cleaned up, got an opportunity here to kind of showcase what we saw from him. I want to say it was like 4 years ago. I mean, this guy's not a spring chicken. He's been around a little bit. But I like that situation too. I'm willing to take a flyer on Jonathan Williams, but I'm not going to blow out my fab budget because I don't know where Wilkins is going to be.
That's the problem. If Wilkins wasn't there, I would spend 100% of my remaining fab budget on Jonathan Williams, knowing that Marlon Mack is going to miss some time, but you just can't invest that much. But I think everyone else knows that too. So you can probably get him for a decent amount.
So hypothetical, let's just say you have LaShawn McCoy and you have, who's another back that you might use this week that's on bye?
Kenyon Drake, David Johnson, Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook. It's a big week for buys.
Yeah. So let's just say you lost a stud. One of those studs, it's a buy. Maybe you lost two of them. You might even have a couple of those guys rostered. You need a guy off waivers. We're looking at Scarborough. We're looking at Williams and Hines and Hill, Ajayi, Geis. You can only get one. Let's just say you've only got fab to get one of these guys. Who you dumping your money on?
Well, Indianapolis plays the Texans. So I think that's a decent matchup. I would like to have Jonathan Williams. I think I would roll the dice there and assume that he either jumped Wilkins on the depth chart or Wilkins misses again, because Wilkins didn't practice at all last week. So this could be a multi-week injury. I'm definitely not playing Brian Hill against Tampa Bay. Ajayi is a stash, not a start. The other guy that I'd be looking at if he's out there that was on our list is Darius Geis against the Lions. I think that's a really nice matchup. The workload might not quite be there, but he's definitely the most explosive back in that backfield currently. I'm not thrilled about any of them. And Bo Scarborough scares the crap out of me.
Yeah, I don't trust him getting volume again.
Who knows who gets the carries in that backfield? Ty Johnson could be back. We could see more out of McKissick. It just looks like a really nasty Eagles, Clement, Adams kind of situation there.
Sure. Bunch of garbage cans getting the ball.
Yep.
Well, what about this as a strategy? I'd say dump your money on Geis and wait for Williams to clear. because I think a lot of folks are going to be waiting on Wilkins. And Williams quietly had that 100-yard day, and I don't know that we're seeing the hype around him in kind of the more casual circles that maybe some of us fantasy folks have kind of already seen and started to delve into. It's possible he clears waivers, and maybe you get him as a free agent.
I'm probably not taking that risk. I like him enough to spend a little bit of fab on him. But Geis, I would prefer probably, especially as a play down the stretch. I think that he's going to get an increased workload as the season goes on. They got to see what they've got.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
All right, Joe, lay those low-owned guys on me.
It's just one low-owned guy, and he's not even really a running back. He's a fullback. Kyle Juszczyk got a ton of work in that backfield and out as a tight end. So I think that the George Kittle injury is something that is affecting Kyle Juszczyk in the passing game. I don't think it's a great play. I think it's one of those situations where you're breaking glass in case of emergency in a deeper league or a dynasty where he's not owned. But you could do worse. He's getting a target share that's viable with Kittle out. Like he had 7 targets this last week? That's
yeah,
viable.
it was something like that. And it helps that not only was Kittle out, so you saw a little bit of Dwelly in there, but Breida was out too.
And it sounds like that could be a long-term situation. He's getting multiple opinions on that ankle. So
right. And so it wouldn't shock me if Juszczyk had another pretty decent day.
All right, let's move on to wide receivers. First up, Deebo Samuel out of San Francisco. Already talked about him on our cheap dates. Randall Cobb in Dallas. Devontae Parker, Miami. Hunter Renfrow in Oakland. And Jamison Crowder is only at 70% ownership. For the love of God, if you're in that league that's like part of the 30% where he's not owned, run, don't walk to the waivers.
Yeah, I think all of these guys are solid pickups. I don't think we have to mention too much about them. Who's your favorite, Jeff?
Don't be biased. Don't be biased.
I think you can be biased. It's okay. He's the best one.
Well, I mean,
I was hoping he would mess up on that one.
I wanted to go Deebo, but I really need to know what's happening with Kittle, because if Kittle comes back, I see Deebo's volume dipping back down. Randall Cobb seems to have a role regardless of Amari and regardless of Gallup. So, God, all of these guys are so good. Like, I really like any and all of these guys, except for Parker. I don't trust Parker. He's been so super solid, but I got a mental block. Give me Randall Cobb.
I like Cobb. I think Samuel is kind of carving out a role that is independent, but it will certainly be smaller if Kittle makes it back. I watched this video that Pro Football Doc posted about George Kittle, and he was talking about how it looked like he was favoring the knee, and that would indicate that there's more damage than they're letting on. But who knows, man? It's all speculation.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm hoping as a Kittle owner that that's not the case and that it's relatively minor and we'll have him back against Green Bay, but I'm not holding my breath on that. Because they said it's a bone bruise, and I'm like, I don't know.
All right, Joe, you got any low-owned wide receivers for me?
We're running a little long here, so I'm just going to list them quickly. But Taylor Gabriel and Anthony Miller both had huge snap shares. If that offense is any good at all down the stretch, they could be viable. Tim Patrick had a 70% snap share in Denver. Kiki QT looks like he's out of the doghouse with a 70+% snap share in Houston. And N'Keal Harry, if Sanu has a significant ankle injury, could end up being a guy that could win you some games down the stretch. Nelson Aguilar, same narrative, but Alshon Jeffrey in the place of Sanu. And Kelvin Harmon. I don't love that offense, but he had a 92% snap share. So he's a guy that you could look at in deeper leagues. I don't think there's any upside whatsoever, but he could get you by in an emergency.
All right, and on to tight ends. All I really have is Ryan Griffin. Still doing pretty good things up there in New York, and, they don't have Herndon anymore, so whatever.
Yeah, I think he's got a carved out role in that offense. I like Ryan Griffin. I think there are certainly better options, but if you're still streaming tight end at this point, he's a guy you absolutely have to be looking at.
You got any lower owned guys then, Joe?
Just Dawson Knox. He had a 70% snap share versus Miami. He's owned in fewer than 5% of all fantasy leagues. I don't know how this guy's still out there in that many leagues. He's been pretty solid. He's not a great play, but he's better than a lot of these guys that are only playing 30, 40, 50% of the snaps.
All right, then that'll do it for our Week 11 recap episode. Anything you guys want to throw out there before we get out of here?
Nope, I'm feeling good, man. This one went long, so let's get on out of here.
All right, for Jeff at NFL_DMatteo, for Joe at Human Stat Sheet on Twitter, and of course for myself at Murphy FFT. or find us all on Facebook in the NFL Fantasy Football Discussion Group. Bye, guys.
Later.
Just remember, if you need it back, Geist, baby.
Stop it.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Takeaway Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And follow the show on Twitter at FF Takeaway.
Done with you.
God, you're gross sometimes.
It's so bad. But it entertains me so much.